I've wanted to do this topic for a long time now, and as you can tell, it's not quite something that would fit on my main channel, so I'm gonna do it here. What would you say your guys' favorite moments in NBA history are, whether you've been watching for 2 years or 4 years, just moments that you experienced? What are your favorites? We're in the 2018 season now, which means I've been closely following basketball for about a decade, but I've watched it even before then, so I would say probably about 13 or 14 years has been since I've officially watched the NBA, and I have seen so many things, and there's 4 moments I would say that stick out of my head for one reason or another, not necessarily because they meant something good for me or my team, but there's just moments where I reacted a certain way and they just stick out of my memory, and I felt like sharing them with you guys. Let's start kind of recently, back in the 2016 season with Stephen Curry's 46-point game against the Oklahoma City Thunder with that crazy game winner. If you've been watching the NBA even since then, there's no way you haven't seen this. That night alone sticks out of my head for a couple of reasons, because of what happened and what I was doing during the game. So as far as watching that game, that was in the midst of Golden State's 73-win season. And this was in the midst of Curry's unanimous MVP season, where he had already done so many crazy things. But I think most of you would agree with me if you saw that game that this was, I can't fact check it right now, I think that was his best game that season. If you look statistically and visually, that had to be his best performance. He set some 3-point record that night with 10 or 11 threes, can't remember exactly which one, but what sticks out so much from that night was the degree of difficulty on every shot he took. Every 3-pointer, I would say he probably only got like 1 open shot that whole night. The rest of them were off the dribble, off balance, contested, hand in his face. There was one where Steven Adams had his hand like he was anticipating the 3-pointer. Steph Curry still launched it and made it. And then of course, there's the one where he's dribbling up at the very end and he pulls up from pretty close to half court and he shoots it like a jump shot and he makes it. And the reason this is one of my favorite moments in NBA history is for a couple of reasons. First of all, that one made, at least for that season, it made Stephen Curry transcendent in my mind because I had already seen so many crazy things from him that year. And then you see him hit that many contested 3-pointers at night from a crazy distance and then pull up at half court, or a couple of feet in from half court for a game winner, and the game was tied. And I remember me and my friend who I grew up with in middle school, we were both texting because we were watching the game at that time. And I actually screenshotted our conversation because I figured that one day I was gonna want to show what we were talking about, whether it was on a YouTube channel. I wasn't really big back then, but I figured I was gonna want to show it, and now would have been that time. But of course that phone broke. Phones don't last that long. I don't have it anymore. But the things that we were talking about during that game, first of all, I can recall, I guess he was kind of caught up in the moment, but he was like, man, I don't even know if Jordan or LeBron or Kobe, if they were this hard to guard, because if you were watching that game in real time, you would understand the kind of shots Curry was hitting. It was like, we've never seen this from anybody before. This is just different. But I'll never forget when he pulled up from half court, because we had already been talking about the game the whole time. He pulled up for that game winner. I grabbed my phone. I went ballistic. I typed, what the fuck? Like a bunch of U's and whatever. Like, it was just crazy. We both went ballistic over that moment because just hadn't ever seen anything like it. And that's why it's one of my favorite moments, because it just pops out of my head from every single shot he hit that night. It's just like you couldn't believe what you were watching. So following that up, I guess, yeah, we'll go ahead and go to another moment later that season. And this moment, I guess they kind of coincide. It was in the NBA Finals. It was LeBron James's block and Kyrie Irving's shot. Obviously, I wasn't on the side of the Cavaliers. I'm never on the side of the Cavaliers. I'm a Celtics fan. But that goes with this season because everything that was riding on Game 7, this hasn't been that long. The legacies that were on the line in Game 7, from LeBron James at that time to the Warriors being up 3-1 and having won 73 games and it being Curry's MVP season. The actual moment I want to talk about in that game, though, was LeBron James's block. And if that's something that you didn't witness live, I'm gonna tell you, you were robbed. You were robbed of an incredible experience, whether you're a LeBron fan or a LeBron hater, whichever side you stand on. That's something you wanted to see live. The intensity of that game, Game 7, is probably, still to this day, probably the best game I've ever watched. It was because of everything that was riding on it. Very intense affair. And I'll never forget, me and my little brother, we're standing in front of the TV by this point because this is the end of the fourth quarter. Nobody's scored in quite a while. And we're standing, my hands are on my knees because like I'm like leaning into the TV because I'm just so into this game. It was ridiculous. And the Warriors got on the fast break. And in my mind, I was like, okay, they're about to score. Curry passes it to, I can't remember exactly how that sequence went. I think Curry had it, bounced past to Iguodala, and this is what made that moment so amazing for me. I didn't see LeBron James until he was all the way up on the backboard with his hand on the ball. I promise you, it was that. What happened that day must be like what it feels like to get hit by a truck that you just didn't see coming. That's the best way I can describe it. Because as Iguodala went up, I thought the layup was good. I was like, there's no one there. This is an easy layup. He double clutched to get J.R. Smith off of him. The next thing I know, there is just this gigantic, just because they were wearing all black that night, just gigantic all black figure all over the backboard, and he blocks it. And the thing is, because I didn't see him, my reaction was delayed. My reaction to the block was delayed. I was still leaning into the TV when it happened. The block happened. I heard my dad like yell behind me, and I just didn't react to it. I was like, okay, like I was still breathing hard. I was panting. I was like, okay. I didn't know how to register what happened because I didn't see him. He came out of absolutely nowhere. And I think there was a pause in the action a couple moments after that. And as they were showing the replay, I was like, I can't even describe that feeling. I just told my family, I told my brother and my dad, I was like, that's one of the greatest blocks in NBA history. Like, we just witnessed one of the greatest moments in NBA history. And of course, after that was Kyrie's three. And the reason I remember that so well is because, again, nobody had scored. And when he hit that three-pointer, although Cleveland was only up by 3 points, I had this feeling of like fate. Like, I realized that it was kind of fate for Cleveland to win that night. I think a lot of you probably had that feeling too. It just seemed like too much of a perfect ending for anything else to happen. And yeah, that one, even though I watched the rest of the game and I was kind of hoping for a comeback, I was like, yeah, I think Cleveland probably just wrapped that up with that shot. So yeah, that's also one of my greatest memories because I remember Draymond Green almost losing his life as well. Go back and watch the replay if you don't remember. They had that play that they actually ran successfully on Christmas Day, but Kyrie Irving, he almost screwed it up. He was running really fast when he really needed to be using clock. He ran really fast towards the goal. Then LeBron James cut in. Nobody was paying attention to him somehow, and he got so high in the air. Like, Draymond Green wouldn't be in the NBA today if that dunk went in. I'm telling you, there's no way if that dunk was completed, Draymond would not have a career today. So now let's rewind the clock back to 2010. Good God, wait, was this really? Yeah, this was 8 years ago, so almost 10 years ago now. And the Celtics are in the midst of at that point in January, it was a disappointing season because Kevin Garnett had came back from knee surgery. They signed Rasheed Wallace. They came in loaded, and everybody assumed that Boston was going to make a run at the finals again. However, up to this point, Boston, they had struggled mightily. I believe Paul Pierce went out at that point, or at some point with like knee surgery and came back a couple of weeks later. Long story short, Boston was basically a 500 team. I can still attest this day that back in 2010, I had to be one of the few people on earth that said the Celtics were still going to make the finals. And I wanted them to prove that so much, and they had the perfect chance here. It was January, it had to be the end of a January game, and they were playing against the Lakers. They were the defending champs at that point. And so this is a perfect chance. And I think Boston had control. It was a home game for Boston, and they had control most of that game. And then at the end, it was LA was down by 1 point, if I can remember correctly. And all Boston had to do was get a stop, and they likely win the game. It turns into a free throw affair. Boston has a really good chance of winning. And I'll never forget Kobe Bryant hitting one of the most irritating, contested, heartbreaking fadeaways. Like, if this had been in the playoffs, it would have been a legendary moment. And the reason I remember it is because Ray Allen defended it so damn well. Kobe Bryant, I believe, like he was driving to the rim, then he stopped, and Ray Allen swipes at the ball twice. Great defense. Kobe fades away. Ray Allen is still there, and he made it. Now, the reason I remember this, not just because of that shot, it's because of what happened after that. Boston was down by 1 point, and of course that gave them a chance to win the game with whatever they ran. I've never been able to actually find the end of this game on YouTube, but I remember the play that happened. They ran a play, and it ended up giving Ray Allen a three-pointer at the left wing, I believe. I cannot find it anywhere on YouTube, but Ray Allen took a three-pointer at the left wing. It was a pretty good look, and he missed it. And I was in the 9th grade when this happened. I was so mad. Like, I'm pretty sure like I hit the TV. And then after that, I went to my room, and if you own a PlayStation 3, you know how you have your PlayStation Network name, and back then you could have like a comment like by your name, like you just write whatever you wanted. I went to edit the comment and I wrote Ray Allen sucks in all capital letters. That's so funny, stupid shit you do when you're a kid. Yeah, I wrote Ray Allen sucks in all caps. And yeah, it's probably, you know, that shows you like what kind of appreciation Boston fans have for Ray Allen. That's why he ended up leaving us. Speaking of Ray Allen leaving, I don't even know if this qualifies as one of my favorite memories, because this is nothing good. But it's one of my most prominent memories, and I guess for that reason it's favorite, because of the kind of emotions it evoked. So this was in 2013 when Ray Allen was with Miami. You can kind of tell where this is going, but it's a little bit deeper than that. Because in Game 6 of the 2013 Finals, I'm not sure how many of you were watching that game, but it completely seemed like the Spurs were about to win the championship that night. They dominated most of that game. They had a double-digit lead, and Miami looked dead. So, of course, towards the end of the game, we know that LeBron James ends up bringing them back. And at that point, when LeBron brought them back and I think they took the lead for the first time, I'm pretty sure at that point I kind of accepted that there was going to be a Game 7. Because normally when a team comes back, they have all the momentum, and there's no coming back from that. Once a team is like storming, you know, they normally go ahead and finish out the comeback and win the game, especially after they take the lead. So that's what happened. But then the Spurs had an improbable comeback in like the last 2 minutes of that game, and so much happened. So my dad is a LeBron fan, and of course I knew a lot of LeBron fans, so there was always kind of like a little rivalry going on, and of course I wanted to see somebody else win so I could always hold dominance over them. That's basically what it broke down to back then. So what I remember is, even after the Miami Heat comeback, the Spurs came back, and I remember Tony Parker ended up hitting a 3 on LeBron James, which was, you know, Tony Parker's not a great three-point shooter, and this was contested, and LeBron is way bigger. So it was like a step back three-pointer at the top, and he hit that, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe this. And then you guys remember the whole sequence that happened. LeBron turned the ball over a couple of times, missed some shots, and then the final thing I remember about that was Ginobili stealing the ball. And it was from LeBron's turnover, and once he got fouled, I believed that that was the end of the game, because Miami was down by that had to be with like under a minute left. There wasn't a lot of time left. All the momentum had shifted back from the Spurs, and that was unbelievable. I was watching the game with my dad, and I was like, the Spurs really just pulled this off. After giving up the lead, they came back and they took the momentum. So especially when that happens with under a minute left, even if you've looked back at like stats, like the San Antonio Spurs had all the reason in the world to win that championship. The yellow ropes were out, and Ginobili stole the ball. I'll never forget, I went running around my house. I was yelling. I went to like the dining room, and I was like jumping and pump fisting in the air. My dad was just my dad was sitting on the couch, silent in depression. And then it all fell apart. And the significant thing about this falling apart is, around that time, how you guys see the Golden State Warriors today, that's how I saw the Miami Heat back then. After they won their first championship, and this was their third straight finals, I thought LeBron was going to stay in Miami, and they were always going to have like superpowers on that team, and nobody was ever going to be able to beat them. So if they lose to the Spurs, I assume that this is one championship in like 3 tries now. They're going to go ahead and break that team up, and the NBA is going to have a little bit more parity again. So that's also something that I had riding on it back then. And so the breakdown happened, the missed free throws on the Spurs side and 3-pointers on the Miami Heat side. And that's one of those once-in-a-lifetime games. Like, Miami winning that game was, I'm pretty sure, as close to as probable as T-Mac winning that game when they were down by 8 to the Spurs. So, you know, of course, you know, the Houston Rockets comeback, that was way more impossible. But this Miami Heat comeback was pretty impossible as well, especially with the fundamentally sound team like the Spurs. And so I witnessed the Ray Allen 3-pointer live. That was an experience. Of course, my dad got up super happy about that. And I was just waiting to see what the Spurs were going to do. And we know the rest is history. They lose that game. They lose that series. But I'll never forget, I woke up the next morning with the biggest headache. I woke up with a migraine level headache because I was so invested back then in seeing the Miami Heat lose and being able to talk trash to my dad and my friends and being able to see some more parity in the league. I thought Miami would break up after that. I woke up the next morning and I went to the gym and I had a headache. Like, you would have thought I was a player on the team. I had a headache from that, man. But that's why I consider it such a great NBA memory, because I think that's how sports is supposed to be. Whether it goes good or bad for your team, if it can create some kind of memory that you have vividly years later, as you can see, like some of these I remember vividly from 8 years ago, that's what sports is all about as a fan. And, you know, most of these moments I described didn't do anything for me, and most of them were bad, but I enjoy the hell out of those memories. So Let me know what are your favorite NBA memories. Doesn't have to be 4 of them, but just things that stick out in your mind, stories that you have, things that you did, and the way you reacted to those games when they happened. I love to hear them. Hit the like button, comment, and sub if you enjoyed, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.